Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fifth monthly Eshenbaugh Land Company webinar. Today, we've got a great group of panelists that will be talking to us about the cost of doing nothing when it comes to government regulation and changes in policy regarding land. So I'd like to just quickly introduce our speakers, and then we'll turn it over to Bill to get started. Before I do that, there are some housekeeping items I'd like to go over. This is recorded, so if anyone has questions or would like to watch it again, just shoot me an email afterwards, and I'm happy to send the link of the recording. Also, there is a Q&A box at the bottom. Feel free to shoot us questions or type in the chat, and we'll try and get those answered as we can. Trying to limit it to an hour, so hopefully this is enjoyable, and look forward to it. With that, we'll get started. Our panelists are Carol Platt, and Carol is a landowner and realtor with Platt Legacy Properties, and she's been CEO in the past of the Osceola County Realtors. So she's going to give us a perspective from the landowner side, runs a large cattle ranch operation in Kissimmee. And then we've got Michael Brooks, who is a founder and shareholder of Brooks, Shepherd, and Rocha, a law firm in Tampa, who is a very well-known land use attorney in the Tampa Bay area. And then we've got Barbara Wilhite with Wilhite Law. And Barbara is past Pasco County attorney and now is out on her own doing land use in mostly Pasco County. So with that, we appreciate it, and I'll turn it over to the founder of Eshenbaugh Land Company, Bill Eshenbaugh, to take it over from here. Bill?
Good morning. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the intro, and thanks to the panelists for being with us this morning. First of all, I hope you're all doing well with the COVID-19 out there, and that everyone is in good health and taking all the precautions you need to stay safe. And just as a market comment, we're living in such a contradictory world these days. Our home builders, our apartment developers, and some of our even retail folks are on fire. They're having record years. They're after sites. There's a parade of new ones coming to the marketplace, especially in the multifamily arena and the multifamily single family arena. I tell my team I spend Sunday nights tossing and turning and not sleeping, thinking, is this the week that it ends? Because it was pretty grim back in early April. It's astounding here in August. So we shall see how this all plays out, but it's just a very strange and interesting time. So that's my market comment on it. We'll try to have about 15 minutes for each of our panelists this morning, so we have our Q&A at the end of it, and we want to be out of here in an hour. Our pattern in the past has made these fun, first of all. Secondly, informative. We try not to avoid subject matters. We'll take things on if we need to that are pertinent and relevant to what we're all doing. So with that, it's my pleasure first to bring Carol Platt on. Carol and I go back several years when she was over at the Osceola County Realtors Organization. She had me come teach a class or two. Her husband, Shane Platt, is one of the chief folks over at Farm Credit in Lakeland. Great guy. Yesterday or day before, we were doing our rehearsal in the background behind Carol, where she's sitting today. We saw 2 trailer loads of calves going to market, so we know, the Platts had a good week in converting some livestock to cash. So congratulations in that regard, Carol. And landowner, and part of the disclosure is I represent a buyer buying the Platts Ranch over in Kissimmee, the Kissimmee Park property. We've been working at it for more than a year, and we've got a ways to go. And part of that goes back to a long time ago, an article on the cost of doing nothing. Carol reminded me of that not too long ago, that she was very much impressed with it. And so that became the genesis of today's conversation. And Carol, with Ryan's introduction in mind, can you just briefly tell us about size of your ranch, a little bit of the history on it, share what you would like to, how long it's been in the family as well. Good morning, Carol.
Good morning. The ranch is here in St. Cloud. It's just a little under 1,200 acres. That's in Osceola County, which most of you know is one of the fastest growing counties in the Central Florida metro area. We're actually located on a peninsula. So we've got about 2.5 miles of lakefront on West Lake Tehopa-Calica. But it's been in my husband's family for 130 years. And we live in the house that Granny Grandpa built back in the early 40s.
In our conversations in terms of how things change for ranch owners when the government takes a look at your property, tell us a bit about what happened around 2011 or so in that time frame from the hot market of 2005 to where we are today. What happened to you all?
Well, it was interesting. It's really about 2006. Of course, the Florida market was hitting record highs, and we actually discovered there was going to be changes in the land use whenever we were approached by a developer that wanted to pay us $50,000 an acre to do ranchettes. So we went down to the county commission, because you just don't sneeze at $50,000 an acre, and just to see if their plan was even feasible. And that's when we found out that no, it wasn't, because the county had embarked upon a growth management plan, and they were, where the ranch is located, was being drawn into the urban growth boundary. So it would need to have a much higher density in its future land use. So they told us that it was going to take about 2 to 3 years to finish the comprehensive plan and create a concept plan for long-term development. So basically, we sent that buyer on their merry way, and we had a little separate 25 acres during that time frame. We sold for $40,000 an acre in March of 2006. I think the comprehensive plan was finished about 2011. So that's sort of every time people hear about something taking place, they think it's going to happen tomorrow. It really doesn't.
It does take time, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And in the process, when you met with the county and with the staff regarding your ranch, did they explain to you what the future development might look like? Were there any other issues that might reduce your density or increase your probability of making a profit on the ranch? What was that? How did that scenario work out?
Well, we of course sat down with our county commission staff and our county commissioner. We've, always had a good relationship with them, and they explained that they were going to have the higher density in order to save a great deal of money on infrastructure and avoid sprawl, and that in the end it'll actually save property taxes for everybody. Well, we're certainly not against avoiding urban sprawl or saving tax dollars, but how it comes together after that's a little different.
In the process, and you said you had around 1,200 acres. How many acres and how many units apparently have been lost from that time to where we are today in the entitlement process on your ranch?
That is the gist of the cost of doing nothing. Basically, in 2011, Shane attended one presentation, and it appeared that our property would have about 4,200 units. After the concept plan was completed, it's been really hard is very elusive in trying to figure out exactly how many units that will be. And it doesn't appear it's going to be that original 4,200 acres. The acreage loss is just constantly climbing. You've got a change in the mean high water line. This is all since that point in time. 250 to 500 foot lakefront setbacks, set asides for community buildings, parks, walkways, tree canopies, new road requirements to meet LDC, and construction of 2 main traversing roads through the middle of the property. We've also got new setbacks from roads, new lot lines, and the latest multimodal trails. I think if I leave something out, somebody's going to find it. It is not over yet. And of course, you've got to have accommodation for wildlife, including bald eagles. The words "the eagle has landed" is normally a phrase for success, but not so much when you're selling land and property. And yes, the eagle did land. So it's really been interesting. It may well be, it might be over 60% of the property.
60% of the ranch will go to reasons other than producing new homes. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I understand that. Wow.
And the view of the land is really heavily impacted. The view at 2.5 miles of lakefront, out on a peninsula into West Lake Tehopekaliga, you would have the largest, really most expansive urban view of any lake in Central Florida. And at this point, it doesn't look like we could build one house for 1,200 acres with a view of the lake. We always joke that the little RV trailers at the end of the road, they have a better view of the lake than we do.
Well,
But
I know my client was aware that there were a couple of eagles there when we started the process, but it looked like a couple of the fledglings also liked your ranch so much they built nests too. So I think we're dealing with 5 of them now. But
yes.
I guess the good news is my client views eagles as a place where they can increase some premiums for homes around the view corridor and so forth. That the eagle's nest might be a nice amenity long range. So maybe there's a blessing in disguise there.
Oh, that's what we're really lucky that that they understand the value of beautiful land and wildlife as being something that will help people that value that too will want to live here and want to pay a premium to do so.
Well, Carol, I know we talked the other day when Barbara was on the call as we were wrapping up, talking about why aren't more ranchers and agricultural people showing up at these hearings in the afternoons or evenings where some of this land planning occurs and some of these meetings are held where there's public input. I noticed Barbara and I were talking about on an issue in Pasco County recently. She and another attorney were about the only ones in the room, and a couple of us were on the call watching it, but the room wasn't full. There was nobody in the room to even comment on something that's pretty significant. What's your take as a rancher, as a 5th generation ranch family out there? What's the story on that?
It's really difficult. I mean, even if you're fairly engaged, and I would say, Shane and I consider ourselves fairly engaged, but it's hard to respond to every ordinance that affects you, and it's even harder to engage in discussions before it's before a committee. But let's say you have a committee meeting on a Thursday night, and they pass something, it'll be voted on, could very well turn into an ordinance on Monday. Now, you try to react to that, go out and get your land planners, get your attorneys, get your CPAs, so that you even understand it and know how it affects you, to try and have an intelligent professional discussion with anybody. That you can't turn it around in one day. And for the most part, ag people, they get up early and they stop late.
Well, that's what I met with Ben Bartle and his dad and brother recently up in Pasco, and I asked him that question. He said, "Bill, man, we're up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we have supper sometime around dark, depending on what time of the year it is, and pretty dead tired to go dragging down to Dade City or over to Newport Richey for a 7 o'clock meeting, or a 2 o'clock in the afternoon meeting just kills our day. We just are too busy trying to make sure we make the payments to Farm Credit or wherever else we owe money to out here as a rancher and do the things we've got to do." So thank you for your comments. I'm going to shift now to Michael Brooks that Ryan introduced earlier. And Michael had a title that he sent me, "The Perfect World, Securing Entitlements and Create Value." Michael, how are you?
How are you doing, Bill?
Good.
And,
what would you kick us off with this morning?
Well, I want to thank you and Ryan for setting these up. They've been very informative, and for including myself and the panelists today on our group. For those who don't know me, my background, and Bill, you know this as well as Barbara, I started on the job site down at the bottom as a tradesman and a laborer. Worked my way up through school on a survey crew. ultimately worked as a draftsman in a civil engineering firm before the days of CAD. Decided at that point that I wanted to be a land use lawyer, went to urban planning school, and here I am today. Was fortunate enough to meet Keith Brickelmeyer back in 1995 when I was in law school. And so I've been practicing here in Hillsborough County for about 25 plus years, a little bit more. A lot has changed in Hillsborough County. And, this was a kind of going down some of your bullet points, Bill. Hillsborough County was one of the first counties to adopt the urban service boundary. It was drawn back in the 1990s in an area that seemed like it was going to take a long time to use up all that land, but we are now approaching a point in which land is becoming scarce. And as they say in the business, the easy sites have been taken up, and we find that the sites that come to us now are challenging, both from maybe a physical standpoint, maybe floodplains, environmental considerations, but also the regulatory landscape has been changing dramatically, particularly in the last couple of years.
I can remember the first time I saw the urban service area in the 90s thinking, this doesn't impact me, man. I'll be retired and long gone before we get anywhere near the borders on that thing. And of course, the '05 market pushed us right out to a large portion of it. And in the 10 years since then, put a lot of pressure on it. Has the county been willing to take looks at moving the urban service line?
Bill, the urban service line was intended, if at least when I talked to the folks who were in the room at the time, was not intended to be a hard line, inflexible type boundary. But that is what we now know that it has become. It's the third rail. There are opportunities where we have used, say, infill type provisions to get projects approved in the rural service area. And there are also at least two areas that are pretty well known, the RP2 and the Waimama Village 2 plan areas that really kind of started off as expansion areas where the developer brings in the utilities into those areas, and then in exchange for that, for putting in the infrastructure, does get to go to 2 units per acre. But beyond that, there is not a lot of desire to move the boundaries. Maybe with the exception, though, of the I-4 corridor. You might remember the I-4 corridor. Right before the downturn, there was a committee put together. You may have been on that with me, Bill. And in fact, there was a plan put together and there was support for it. And it died one night on a rainy Monday night at the boardroom, and it has not been resurrected yet, but it is still out there and occasionally is kicked around as something that might come back. But other than that, we don't see expansion on the horizon.
I made a comment in a seminar that it was similar to the Berlin Wall. You were have or have not, depending which side you're on. And the landowner corrected me and said, no, the Berlin Wall came down. So the urban service area has been tough. And it's in some ways, it's really a contradiction because we've seen over 15 million square feet of new industrial built in Plant City and Lakeland and on further east on 4. But we've got that 15 or 20 mile path between kind of 579 and Plant City where it is outside the urban core area. So that'll be an interesting challenge down the road, won't it?
It definitely will. And as we all know, the influx of residents moving into this county, into the region in general, are going to need housing. And so, we're now seeing some affordability challenges as a result of that artificial restraint on the available land stock.
Michael, you had suggested earlier in one of our discussions that a lot of things we need to be careful of in land use studies, that owners need to be careful about the strings that get attached to proposals and approvals. Talk about that a little bit, if you would, please.
Yeah, and as I was listening to Carol, it is for a landowner, it's a challenge, right? They are. This is a highly technical field. There is a lot of things that get whispered and say, in the county center or in the planning commission meetings that don't always make the light of day necessarily, but they start to get wheels in traction before they really see the real public light of day. And it's hard for us, even in the land use bar, sometimes to stay on top of all that. But there are very real world decisions that are being made. The RP2 and the WV2, which there are a lot of agricultural uses still in those areas. There has been a moratorium placed on parts of those land use areas, and new development standards that are going through a workshop process. We don't yet know what the end of that is, but if you're a landowner, you really need to stay engaged in that. Other regulatory things that impact the landowners. I mean, we have seen an across the board increase in impact fees. Mobility fees were not well, depending on your use, they were not significant. As much as I would say the water and sewer connection fees, the park fees, obviously the school concurrency fees doubled this year. All of those things are costs that factor into the buyer's pro formas. And ultimately, we're seeing our clients go back to the sellers and saying, I can only pay you X minus Y now because of these things. We don't see a lot of landowners like Carol's family in those engaged in those conversations. We can do it as the land use attorneys from or maybe from the builders association from an industry standpoint, but there's really not an umbrella that is out there fighting for the large landowners.
Well, and going from the theoretical discussion about what impact fees do to the real world, I have a multifamily site in Cypress Creek in Ruskin, one of the few left that's entitled, and my offers have gone down by $3,000 to $5,000 a unit because of the impact and school impact fees. Because their answer is the guy next door is not going to get any more rent, nor am I going to get more rent because there are new impact fees. And so the residual value of the land theory comes into play. That what's left for the compression? Only the value of the land or the cost of the land, as far as the developer is concerned. And so they're looking at it as strictly a financial deal. That's reduce what we're paying the landowner, and the landowner's sitting there shaking his head, going, "Why me, Lord? I've been here for 20 years trying to get this thing entitled to the market." So interesting.
And Bill, we may very well see, school concurrency becoming a problem. Right now, we have the ability in most places for a developer to pay a proportionate share payment and move forward. But at the end of the day, we need new schools to be built, and prop share money is not really building those schools. And as we see the school board move towards more of a plan-based, you want to be engaged in that so where those new schools are being built. So it's really kind of two things coming at you at once as an owner.
Sure. Talking about getting things approved for planning, there's some discussion we've had, I've read about having a sunset provision in some of the new zonings that they don't last forever. Can you talk about what that discussion's all about?
Yeah, so that was a proposal that was in the last round of land development code changes. That was an example of where the land use bar came together, my fellow land use attorneys, for the most part. And while it was written in such a way that it didn't apply to existing planned developments, it would have applied if you asked for an amendment to a planned development. And this group knows that, particularly with a larger master plan community, you frequently do update your planned developments. That would wreak significant havoc in the underwriting of these type of projects. It raises questions of whether you're doing bond financing for CDDs on some of these, and where does that leave you if it expires? that is a concept that is coming back in the next round, and we don't know what that form will be, but those, the financial implications are obviously something that we are talking to the county about, trying to mitigate those.
You had suggested also, maybe talking a little about in terms of doing nothing, that landowners, when they go to contract and sell their property, some things that they maybe should include in contract provisions for documents and studies and so forth, and then some advice you might have for them if their deal falls apart, which occasionally that happens. I know it's sad story for brokers because our payday doesn't happen, but tell us what you would recommend in those two arenas.
Absolutely. We see two types of sellers. On one extreme, the hands off, I really don't want to know. Tell me when the closing's happening and my check is ready. On the other extreme are folks who are much more engaged. For either of those, we're representing seller. We want to make sure first and foremost that if the transaction doesn't go through, that you're keeping ownership of the work product. And that may be anything from the early stages to due diligence, surveys, topo surveys, geological type work, wetland boundaries, delineations. That type of stuff all has value for the next seller next buyer down the road, all the way to if you've got approvals and permits in hand before a deal falls apart. And in particular, if you have those type of work product that you've taken ownership of, you really want to do what you can to keep them active. I've got an example, just an extreme example in Jacksonville, where we kept a concurrency certificate valid for nearly 12 years. Even with all of the interim payments, it still turned out to be a $500,000-$600,000 value at the end to the new buyer. So there are values in those approvals. There may be vested rights that come along with those, and so we always want to keep those things active.
We appreciate that part of it. I know we're also finding that sellers sit there and go, well, I have a survey, I have an environmental report, I got some soils work that was done by somebody. Why can't a new buyer just take that in 15 days, get their due diligence done? And yet we hear from buyers going, well, we got a fiduciary, we have partners, we just cannot accept someone else's work. Any comments on that, to what you're seeing as a practitioner?
It always helps. I mean, most of the sophisticated land developers will want to do their own work, but having field work to compare it to will speed up the process, no doubt, and let you know if there's discrepancies. And yes, it'll take things off of the checklist going forward.
Anything else you want to share with us in the as we wrap up with you?
Yeah, I would say stay involved. And Carol kind of highlighted the reasons why that is challenging. I totally appreciate it. It's hard for us, but as a landowner, you have to stay vigilant as to what's going on around you. And I know Barbara's going to talk a lot about elections. Elections matter, and because policy is politics, is one of my urban planning professors taught me long ago, and that is never truer than today.
Well, Michael, thank you very much for your sharing this morning.
Hey, Bill.
Some of our audience is not necessarily right here in Tampa, so just as a comment, Michael's practice is primarily Hillsborough County, which is the county that surrounds the city of Tampa. Carol's about 100 miles east of us over here, I guess, something like that. And Barbara is in the next county north of us, where for the last 20 years, the home builders have been moving north at one time slowly, now pretty rapidly. There's a day coming probably when Pasco County has more building permits than Hillsborough. Pasco is a big, long county all the way from the Gulf of Mexico across US 301 in the east. It's so big that it kind of has two government centers in the old Dade City County Courthouse on the eastern end, and then the county government center over on the western end. And Barbara brings with us, in addition to her graduation from Stetson University College of Law, She worked uniquely for the county for several years as county attorney's office, and then left there, joined her, or started her own firm, and has been one of the leading practitioners in the county on land use and zoning. Barbara Wilhite, good morning.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me and inviting me, Bill and Ryan and my other panelists. Wow, you guys are great. I'm glad to sit beside you and get to talk about things that I love and they're near and dear to my heart. I've been practicing in Pasco County for 24 years, which is most of my practice. I've spent 3 years doing litigation. I'm out of law school, and then went to Pasco County in 1996, 24 years ago. I spent 11 years at the county, 13 years. The last 13 years I've been in private practice. 10 of those, my firm has had its 10-year anniversary right during COVID, so we really didn't get to celebrate very much as a firm. But I'm happy to have had the experiences that I have that bring me to where I am today. Having that experience working for Pasco County for so many years, being there when they rewrote the last major rewrite of their comprehensive plan in 2006, a major participant in that. Worked with the county when they rewrote their code, reorganized their code in 2012. Those experiences give a unique perspective. And a lot of times what I do is I'm a quarterback. I read the tea leaves because I can usually tell you for every action that you want to take, what the reaction will be in Pasco County, because I've been doing it so long. And so it's helpful. I'm able to provide a path forward for clients. And a lot of them are amazed. They'll talk to me for 15 minutes and I'll say, this is what we need to do. And they're like, in 15 minutes, you didn't do anything but sit in your office and you could tell us exactly what we needed to do to move our project forward. And that comes with those 24 years and a lot of work keeping on top of everything. You got to keep on top of the politics. You got to keep on top of who's the latest staff people and where do they come from and what are their backgrounds, what's going on with the code, what's going on with the comp plan. But through all those things, I have a lot of success in helping people move forward and figure out what they need to do so that Bill can close transactions and all of you can do business in Pasco. It's been a great place over the last few years to do business here. That's because of a lot of hard work and putting together the right board members. And so politics do matter.
Barbara, back in, I think it was 2006, Pasco did something that was kind of unique then, maybe still is today. They adapted some future land use categories for the employment centers at major nodes of the interstate system or the major east-west highways in the county. What was the thinking behind that, and what impact has that had on the county and on your practice maybe?
So the county struggled with the 54-75 interchange. Most of it went residential. They felt that they missed opportunities there. And so when they were redoing their comp plan, it's hard to believe it's been so many years since they really focused on their comp plan, which is becoming a problem, and I'll talk about that. They decided they wanted to reserve land at unique locations for employment center uses. What has happened is it's really been a hold on land because it was a one-size-fits-all approach with all these crazy percentages, which is very hard to develop land pursuant to a checklist. It's not organic. You have to meet these requirements even if they don't work. And we have an issue with scale. The same percentages apply if you're a 200-acre project or 800-acre project. And so when you start coming up with 55% of your property has to be office or industrial, and you have 800 acres, that becomes, a very large place to try to deal with. So I think we see it's been a hold on land. I think we've been successful in working with the county to refine, to actually come up with a real plan for those areas that have employment centers. We were actually successful in actually entitling the first employment center without modifying the land use recently for Amazon. So we actually have a project that actually complied with the vision for an employment center. Took a little bit of work to make those percentages work, and staff worked well with us. So it's been a hold on land, but I think the county's been receptive and understand that it was a hold, it was one size fits all, and we need to figure out how to honor those principles of what they were trying to achieve, but actually develop property. So.
Good, thank you. I had a meeting not too long ago with a ranch family, and they probably owned collectively 8,000 to 10,000 acres in northern Pasco. They're busy every day running cattle and running a ranch. And so when I met with them, I actually had our good friend Pat Gasaway of the engineer and design firm attend the meeting because in being out at the ranch, I've been out there hunting with them, and I've said, you know, have you guys ever looked at your future plans on your ranch? And oh no, we're third, fourth, fifth generation ranchers. We've got little 4-year-olds here learning how to ride a horse. We want to be ranchers on down the road. I said, well, you still may want to take a look at what the county's thinking about your ranch and so forth. When we met with them, they had no idea that some planners already drawn a couple of roads across the bottom end of their ranch for future plans. And they said, they can't do that, can they? No, I think we've explained to them maybe they can. What's your comment on that? What do you see, and what do you say to ranchers and landowners when they have that reaction that they can't do that to me, can they?
Well, they can, and they have, and they will. So getting involved, and it's tough to get involved, but you have to get involved. And it also starts with electing the right people put in the position as county commissioners. And you have a few principles that are really important, that even if you can't be involved, if you have the right representatives, they'll know things like they set policy, not the staff. They have a process so that when there is something being proposed that would impact your property, there's a way that you know about it, because it is impossible to run after the staff. And I find it challenging to try to keep track of everything, but that's what I do. So we get paid to do, so that's my job. But you put the right people in office that have certain principles about how they operate, they will lead and make sure that they're leading the policy and not their county staff, whomever they might be of the day, and that they also have a process. It's a transparent process to try to make sure that things aren't just being approved as we were talking about. Sometimes it comes up on an agenda on a Friday, you see it, and it's going to be heard on Tuesday. Well, we're not seeing that happening in Pasco County. We have a horizontal roundtable that a lot of consultants participate in, and you can participate in that, and the county staff is fairly transparent in what they're proposing to do, and you can participate. Usually when things get to the commission, there's not a lot of debate because we work things out ahead of time. So, but it took a long time to set up those processes. You know, under former administrations, former county commissions, it wasn't transparent like that, and we were forced with reading stuff on Friday that was going to happen on Tuesday.
Barbara, we had a surprise, and to me at least, maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but in Pasco County, we recently had a change in the regulations regarding apartments, and there was a 2,000-foot setback from certain major highways where apartments can no longer be developed. I was surprised in talking to a few apartment developers who said, hey, we're not from here, we don't have a deal up there, or we have a deal up there and we're vested. This might be good for us in a selfish way, but we couldn't marshal much attention or interest from apartment developers to go get involved in that issue. Tell us a bit about the background maybe and what has happened to that one. And that was kind of, I think it came pretty quickly and was a bit of a surprise to some folks. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. So the board, at least the board chairman, started expressing concern about the proliferation of apartment development on 54. State Road 54 here in Pasco County, many projects going up. And he called a workshop with the rest of the board in February, pre-COVID. And there was discussions about a certain area of 54 and 56 where the county was seeing a lot of apartments, and they wanted to see if they could be addressed differently, or if there was a way to do it so that they were mixed use projects and not just single product multifamily apartments up on the corridor itself. And so that evolved from, and there was two things happened in that workshop. One thing was there was a consensus of the board to raise mobility fees for multifamily. And when I say that to the board members, they're like, we didn't raise them, we took away an incentive, because the way Pasco County mobility transportation fees are, is that the county lowers the amount of mobility fees by other funding sources. And so what they said was, we have plenty of apartment development, which might be true in one area of the county. So we're going to take away that incentive, which raised the fees. But what they interestingly did was they didn't just limit it to that area, the urban service area, they did it countywide. Nobody objected. I couldn't get anybody interested in objecting. And really what a lot of the apartment developers said is, it doesn't matter to us, it comes off the property, the price we pay. And so that's the message to landowners is, some of these things nobody's going to object to because it impacts you as the landowner and not the developer. So, so that fee increase went in place. The mobility fees were raised across the county for multifamily apartments. And the second thing is a policy direction a consensus was reached at that workshop that 54 and 56, the staff was to look at how to address apartments 54, 56 from Gun Highway to US 301. And interestingly, and then that was a workshop. Staff, without going through the transparent process, on a Friday, put together, the agendas comes out, I read the agenda, there's a policy to go before the board on Tuesday. Didn't go through a transparent process, nobody knew about it, and fortunately, that board meeting was canceled, so we'd have some time to talk to our commissioners, which by the way is very difficult to take commissioners who are hearing from their staff and try to work with them and educate them in a few days. So fortunately that meeting was canceled because it wasn't noticed properly. And so we had more time. I wouldn't say really we, because I think there was like me, to try to work on trying to make this policy more workable. The staff decided on their own that they wanted to expand the area where they wanted to go after apartments and have them treated differently and plan amendments, because this policy goes beyond just apartments. And staff on their own decided they wanted to do it in the whole urban service area, despite what the board had told them that they felt comfortable addressing at that workshop. So when it did come forward before the Board of County Commissioners, because in Pasco, we've elected people who set policy, and staff doesn't set policy. They said, look, we were fine. We told you we had a consensus. We wanted to see something addressed on 54, 56 in a certain geographic area, not in most of the county. So they did tell their staff that they wanted to limit the geographic scope. The other thing that I think is, so that happened. There is a lot of misinformation about what that policy means. It is not a setback that precludes apartments. So when you look at 54 and State Road 56 from Gun Highway to 301, there's not a 2,000-foot strip where you can't have apartments. What the policy says is that you have to have a mixed-use development, and they don't want to see the apartments being adjacent to the corridor. They want to see them set back. So you can't do single product within single product zonings or land uses within that distance along that corridor. It remains to be seen exactly how it'll play out. I think there's a lot of projects already zoned in that corridor. I know there's some that are not, like Two Rivers Ranch. And so we'll see how the policy is applied. But it certainly isn't a preclusion. It's just you're going to have to go through planning, and you're going to have to satisfy the third floor at the planning department at the government center.
Well, and I just got an email while we were chatting from the Bay Area Apartment Association with their Active Developers Council, and asked me to point out that if you want to get involved, give me a call. I'll give you the contact there to get involved for any of our listeners who may want to be a part of the Bay Area Apartment Association involvement in that as well. So, Barbara, as we get closer to the end here, what else would you like to talk about that you see coming on the horizon as issues we should be discussing in Pasco County as we go forward?
I think it's just very important to participate, and we got to find a forum how we all can participate and support each other, support our incumbents. We have a very pro-business, very good board. You know, we're able to look at when you want to invest in Pasco County and you want to do a project in Pasco County, you can meet with a commissioner and you can meet with commissioners and they'll give you their ideas, and there's not a lot of, always uncertainty in the development title process, but given that you have a pro-business board, you can get through the process, but we have to keep those board members, and we have 2 incumbents up still for re-election. A majority of our board was up for re-election this year. Actually, 4 of the 5 seats were at play. We've filled a couple of those seats now. We have 2 more incumbents up. And so I would just ask everybody to participate. You know, I mean, when the new policy was coming into play, it was going to affect most of Pasco County, and I couldn't get anybody to participate with me. I went on my own and was able to make a difference to help all of you in your ability to develop property in Pasco. But If you want to be, I try to have email chains where I can get information out. Maybe there's some way we can organize. You just appears to be a really big group interested in this webinar today. Maybe there's a way we can harness the energy here. And if you're interested in Pasco, I'm interested in you and want to help you here.
Good. Well, thank you on that regard. We do want to actually help people. We have questions all the time. Like, I can't make your webinar today, or I missed the one in July and so forth. So Ryan's going to put out a flyer to everyone who was invited to today's webcast with the link to this one as well as the previous 4. And they also are being posted to our website at dirtdog.com. So if you missed any of them, or you want to go back and look at them again, or you want to send them on to someone, please feel free to use them. They're not copywritten, and we don't care what you do with them, but if you want to send them on, that's great in that regard. And as we get toward the end here, we had a little reminder too from Rick Harris, who said, hey, don't forget, you got the Byrd-Harris Act. If you have to sue over some of these takings, that's a way to go and make a claim on it. From Chris Logan to the panelists, with 1,000 people moving a day, how do we find a balance between urban and suburban and rural area balances? And Chris, I got to tell you, it's probably more than 1,000 a day, and there's probably that many moving out of the cities to the suburban areas from what we see on folks seeking places away from some of the urban environments and going to Hernando County and Arcadia and different places too. So I'm not sure we have an answer today on that balance. And then my favorite question always comes, here's Ron Weaver. Will you see in-person zoning meetings versus as compared to virtual? Do we think we're going to see the continuation of virtual meetings, and are they effective? And I guess I'll ask the 2 attorneys if you've gone to virtual meetings, zoning hearings, and so forth, and have they seemingly served your clients? Michael, you want to jump on that one first?
Yeah, Bill, I have not done a virtual hearing personally yet, but as you know, and I think most people on this call know, that Hillsborough is beginning to prime the pump because we have about 120, 30, 40 applications that are backed up. I will say that virtual poses serious challenges if you have a project with complexities, with opposition, and at least personally, and I think among most in the land use bar, we have some hesitation about virtual hearings in those kind of situations. If you've just got a run-of-the-mill development agreement or a conditional use, that might be fine. But there's nothing like having the in-room personal contact.
I might ask Ryan too. My cohort, Ryan's past president of NAIOP and on the board at REIC. Ryan, do you have any comments on the hearings?
No, I would just echo what Michael says. I mean, I know there's at least a backlog, and it's amazing that they can put together all sorts of land use changes, but yet they don't want to hear the rezonings, and I understand the legal side of it. But
And also, Barbara, I know Pasco was one of the early.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
let me talk about Pasco. Pasco did a great job dealing with COVID. Their folks are working remotely, but we haven't seen, they've continued to process plans. The county administrator did something amazing when COVID started, and I don't know if other jurisdictions did this, but he had the foresight regarding platting, because there was a month when we didn't have any board meetings. So he, in his emergency order delegation from the board, delegated that he could approve plats. So we could keep doing business in Pasco for that month that the board was not convening. They also led the way in setting up virtual meetings. We only had about a month when we didn't have meetings. We've been doing virtual meetings and hearings since May. I've done many virtual hearings. And so business is going on in Pasco. It is tricky when they're contested, and it's a run for my money to try to organize teams when we're all in different places and we have to put together a presentation. But we're doing it, and we're keeping things going here for projects. And so it's pretty smooth. You know, we've had they've changed their platform a couple different times about how they handle them, but it's challenging, but we're doing virtual hearings. And to answer your question, you know, how long will they go forward for? Our board isn't totally virtual, they're hybrid. So they have a majority of the board is in person. And so they don't have to any special authorization to do that by the governor. If you're totally virtual, you can only do that pursuant to governor emergency order. So Pasco took it into their own hands of how they were going to do their meetings, since they didn't have to keep waiting for the governor to extend an order. So they're hybrid virtual, where a majority, three commissioners are in the room, and they handle they do not let the public in, where we participate by kiosk, we participate by WebEx. But I think they'll continue it for, until we get past COVID. It is important for the board to have public participation in person, but they have to make sure that everybody's safe.
Good. Well, I thank all three of my panelists. We're down close to the bewitching hour, and we never want to run over on our events. Carol, send some more cattle to market out there, and thank you for taking time off from your job this morning to join us. Michael, always good to see you, and Barbara, thanks for all your sharing and what's going on in Pasco County. Don't forget, everyone on here, get out there and write those checks to people who support your industry and help your livelihood, support your candidates. We've got less than 90 days to have an impact and move on into the great, brave 2021 that's ahead of us. So, again, thanks to our panel this morning and Ryan for getting anything set up here. On behalf of our team at Eshenbaugh Land Company, we look forward to continuing these, and we look forward to another great week. I used to say another great quarter, but right now it's a week-by-week basis, so let's just keep it rolling. Thank you all so much. Bye-bye.